Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field. Hello and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am so excited to have Jody Sirocco back with me. Hi, Jody. How are you?
Hello, wonderful. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Yeah, I am so glad that you came back to talk to us. We loved having you on a previous episode, but today we're actually going to talk about something a little bit different. But before we do that, in case people didn't hear the last episode, can you just give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. As you said, my name is Dr. Jody Sirocco, and I am the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support Research and Implementation Center Director, where we work to implement multi-tiered systems of support across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So really helping teams to build in an integrated, which I mean through academic, behavioral, and social emotional wellness into their multi-tiered systems. So yeah, that's primarily what we do. We offer coaching and training support. And one of the core components that we really work towards is leadership and teaming. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that with you today.
Wonderful. So, yes, so we are talking about leadership and teaming, and we're really thinking about this through a behavior analytic lens. And so, I think sometimes when we think of leadership, there is kind of this tendency to have some mentalistic conceptions about it, right? We think about people who are charismatic, we think about people, who have whatever kind of personality traits, but that doesn't really tell us how to be a good leader. Like,
Right.
I don't know that you can just learn charisma, for example. Um, so as we move into this, I guess one of the first questions I would ask is what makes a good leader from a behavior analytic perspective?
Oh, like you said, I think that's such an interesting way to look at it. And I find, one of the things I love about behavior analysis is the ability to look at it more in depth, like especially when we are talking about sort of those mentalistic views, right? So I think there's a few things that make really great leaders. I think one of the best ways of kind of thinking about this is leadership is not always about the person or the position that they have, right? But it's about the effect they have on the behavior of other people.
I
And
love that.
right, I that was me too. That was one of the things for me that I was like, wow, that is so insightful because that means there's two at play here. You have to think about your own responding. So how is my behavior? Because that's not an isolated thing. The effect that you have on other people's behaviors means you have behaviors you're engaging in well as well, right? And so to me, I think making a good leader is the ability to understand that and how you show up. So understanding your behavior and how that has an impact or influence, and then knowing the behavior of those that are around you and how it's having an effect or not having an effect, right? Are probably one area to go to first that would be really important.
Yeah, I think that's really good because sometimes I think people have this feeling that leadership is kind of this esoteric, like, I'm not a leader. Like, I don't know how to be a leader, or I don't have that title, so I'm not a
Mhm.
leader. But the
Right.
reality, and you're exactly right, is that being a leader means that your behavior influences the behavior of other people. And so,
Mhm.
and hopefully in a positive way.
Right, right, right.
Hopefully you're a good leader that's moving things in a positive way. So if that's the case, one of the things that you have done a lot of work on and background with is ACT and how it fits in with
Mhm.
leadership. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, what does ACT have to do with leadership?
Yeah, so I have been on this ACT journey, personally and professionally for a very
And
long time.
actually, before you get too
Yeah,
far, can you tell us
yeah,
what ACT is? Because I don't know that everybody
absolutely.
knows.
Absolutely, yes. So, and I'm going to talk about ACT in a sense of one perspective, and I'll talk
Yes.
about that in just a moment. So, acceptance and commitment therapy is what you'll commonly hear it stated as, and ACT is really all about promoting psychological flexibility. And what is meant by that is being able to be in the present moment with full awareness and openness to experience whatever is happening, right? And then to take action that's guided by your values. So if you take ACT and sum it up, I love the way some of the authors do this by, not just saying acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, but being accept your thoughts and feelings. So being present, the C, choose value directions, and then T, take the action. So you can choose and take action to do that. And I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody else. I'm not trying to say I'm offering therapy
Right.
or, because you can assume that right away, but a lot of folks talk about this in acceptance and commitment training versus therapy. So what I do a lot of work on is using the principles of psychological flexibility, right? So really thinking about the ACT in its kind of higher level of that, accepting, choosing your values and taking action that I just mentioned. How do you work that into how you show up as an individual, but then also applying that within groups, which a lot of that work came out of pro-social work. That is an emerging area that is using both psychological flexibility and evolutional behavior theory and relational frame theory, that it helps teams work cohesively together, which all is a part of leadership as well. So I think those are some of the things for me that psychological flexibility can play a role in all that you're doing, because if you sum it up into those kind of three areas, you're able to become a noticer of how you're behaving, but then also a noticer of the group's behavior, if you will.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I appreciate kind of so how did you get to this point where you were like, ACT leadership, there's something there, there's a connection.
Yeah, right. So actually, I started doing my dissertation in trying to increase both individual and group well-being in elementary school settings. And one of the things that I got hooked on was, of course, I was already going to acceptance and commitment therapy boot camps. I'm a boot camp nerd. If anybody hasn't been there, you can find them. They're fantastic. Dr. Stephen Hayes was on my dissertation committee, and I was blessed to be able to take a lot of courses a lot of folks look at him as like sort of the godfather of acceptance and commitment therapy, along with many others, of course, who have supported in the development of ACT, relational frame theory, and everything. So my work sort of started there, and I had this passion around burnout for teachers. And what I found in doing that was, we're really quick to providing interventions, responding to kind of precursors, if you will, or trying to solve all the things that contribute to burnout. But there wasn't this kind of like understanding of what are actual interventions that we can do to support teachers. And so when I went in kind of looking at it from this perspective of replacement behaviors, if you will, in doing that work in the study, I started to really look at, wow, everybody has a part to play in this. And when you're talking, not just, we were talking about not just one position that is a leader. And so when we started to look at implementing multi-tiered systems of support and teaming structures, which is a lot of what the pro-social and psychological flexibility was interconnecting for me, that's kind of where it started, because I was like, wow, we're really talking about teaming structures and leadership opportunities in such a basic way. And I mean that with the utmost respect. And basic by, we talk about roles and responsibilities and do we have agendas developed or things like that. But are we really talking about what it takes to be a leader, to help teams to be able to have productive conflict, to be able to know what, how you show up as an individual, and allow people to have perspective or have valued and shared input that's respected, is a really hard thing to foster. So those are kind of in a nutshell how I got to that spot.
So, a lot of times, our school based behavior analysts may not see themselves in a leadership role, right? Or
course, we've talked about the fact that anybody can be a leader. So, what does this have to do with our school-based behavior analysts, and how can they make the connection between some of those discrete leadership behaviors that we talked about versus kind of more this framework of leadership that
Mhm.
might be a little more helpful?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. And also, going back to again, how we were talking about, everybody has the opportunity to be a leader. And I think that is really valuable. And how this, I think, applies to behavior analysts, especially when we're talking about, we're taking this perspective of multi-tiered systems of support. And I think sometimes there is um, underlying fear or avoidance of, hey, I want to do these things, but I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
How do I even get in and start asking the right questions or put myself out there to see that I am valuable and can contribute? And even if you take MTSS out of that equation, I think that can be for anything, because behavior analysts have a wide range of skill sets that I think are underutilized, right? And we have that opportunity. So for me, how do I think all this shows up for a behavior analyst is the ability to sit with being uncomfortable and keep with curiosity, sort of be have the courage to show up and be vulnerable when you can't predict or control the outcome. Because I think if we have these underlying fears or avoidance, right? If I'm like, oh, I want to say this to this person at this time, or I feel like, but if I do that in the past, my history has shown me that it doesn't matter. Or if I try to say something, well, this is what will happen, or, well, maybe that's not really my role. And then I don't do that, right? So this is that pivot point, I guess, if you will, that I think as leaders, and for any leader, the ability to notice when that's showing up and be able to say, hey, what's happening right here, right? Am I about to engage in behavior, which might be, oh, I turn around and walk away, I withdraw, avoid, escape, whatever that might look like for me in that moment. I'm just giving, of course, a hypothetical example here. But is that in line with my values or who I see myself as a leader? Because part of this has to be, what kind of leader do you want to be? And again, if the effect that I have on the behaviors of others, I'm missing a lot of opportunity, right? And so that's the moment for me to decide, can I be vulnerable? Can I be uncomfortable with, you know, get uncomfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable? And then that's such a funny way to say it, but it's about the idea of, without having to know what the outcome is, can I still engage in a behavior that actually might move me toward what I value, but then also encourage other people to behave in different ways?
So, we hadn't talked about this before, but a question popped up in my head while you were
Yeah.
talking because I think that this is real for a lot of people. So, how do we deal with the idea of imposter syndrome? Because I do think
Mm,
a lot of people struggle with, I'm not worthy of being a leader, or I'm not as good of a leader as so and so, or other people seem to have it all together. They always know the right thing to say. They always make the right choices, and I think that little bit of imposter syndrome can settle in. And some of what you're talking about, I think actually is a great framework to help support
yeah.
acknowledging, first of all, that everybody feels imposter syndrome at some point.
Yes. Right.
But so then how do we use this to support ourselves out of that feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just so excited. These are great questions, and you really touched in on something for me personally. I have a lot of imposter syndrome all the time. I feel like it never goes away. It's like it creeps its little head up sometimes. And I love that you're asking about that, because I think this also goes into, I mentioned the word pivots, right?
Right.
And one of to me, there are leadership pivots that behavior analysts or really anybody could engage in. And I'm still in the word pivots. It's not anything, new that's come out of this. This actually comes a lot out of the psychological flexibility world and how you use um, the hexaflex. And I don't know, we don't have time to get into all of that with you, but the hexaflex are really these processes that you can use to create more flexible responses when we're really being inflexible. And the example that I gave was, I might have responded to some rules that I have generated for myself, right? So I'm very rigid in following those. And so I'm not being flexible. And so the pivots help us to notice the opportunity to engage in behavior that allows us to be more flexible. So if I think about it, from that perspective, or like when imposter syndrome shows up or things like that, the way that I like to kind of sum this up, if you were doing this quickly, I mentioned before, it's like let go, show up, and get moving. And the let go side of things is really what you're talking about, right? Because when we are letting go and kind of opening up to the experience of what's happening. So, for example, imposter syndrome. What that looks like for somebody might be covert behavior. You're thinking, I'm not good enough, or comparing yourself. You could be generating these self stories, and so your focus could be on the past. It can be on the future, or your comparisons that you're generating in that moment. And when you're stuck there, you're really inflexible, right? And it's a lot harder to be able to see the types of behaviors that you can engage in. So, and that's that moment to show up. That's the pivot that I'm talking about. So, becoming the noticer. And now, instead of looking at it as, oh, I'm stuck in these thoughts and feelings about imposter syndrome, can I look at this from a useful noticing perspective that allows perspective taking? So stopping and saying, wow, right now, this might be the story that I am telling myself, is that I am not feeling that I'm, up to par, or comparing myself to other people. So it's paying attention to that in that moment rather than getting caught up in that thought, so that you can perceive the world around you. And then that allows you to analyze we're talking behavior analysts. I can now analyze my environment better so that I can change my behavior or engage in a behavior that is in alignment with my values, where before I might have totally withdrawn or moved away or not engaged in something, which allows opportunity.
Yeah, and then I think just to keep following that through, the more you do that and then you have success, that only
Yeah.
reinforces doing it again, right? Which
Right.
of course is the epitome of behavior analysis right there.
Yeah. Right.
But if you never try, then that's going to reinforce, well, I didn't try and I was safe because I didn't put myself out there, but it doesn't get to
Yeah.
the end accomplishment that you were hoping to hopefully get to.
I love what you just said there too, because psychological flexibility is all about workable. It has to be workable in the moment. So there's not these rigid rules like I was mentioning earlier about right and wrong. So you doing that in the moment, right? Yes, walking away in the moment had some benefits. It's those short-term benefits. But the question, like you just said, you have to ask yourself is, in the long run, is that workable to you? Is it acting in service of what you really care about? And if so, well, then you are being the noticer and you're engaged. That same mentality for folks who are really trying to, for example, if I'm in a meeting and as a leader, I'm trying to listen more and not talk, versus somebody else, I don't talk enough. So I'm trying to actually speak up. Well, in those moments, the workability is different because the context is very different, right? And how I show up matters because that's who I am in the moment. But then imagine if you're able to do that not only for yourself, but if you understand the people that you work with and the goals they're working for you to be the noticer with them, to help them or ask them questions to be able to show up or reflect, that helps them move in the ways that matter to them.
And what a great act of leadership that is, really, right? To be able
Right,
to
right.
support people to grow and to expand in their capacity and their skills. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. So Jody, if you were able to provide, like, what if people want to learn more about this? Because obviously we're
Yeah.
not suddenly experts on ACT. We're not suddenly experts on leadership today. So where can people go to learn more about this?
Oh my gosh, there's so many places. You probably actually could Google it and get yourself somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think that one place to start, I did mention that there is the Act Made Simple. There's a book with that's fantastic. That's a great place. Love it. I tend to go to acceptance and commitment therapy and an experiential approach to behavior change, which is Hayes, Strassel, and Wilson. That's a great foundational one. A Liberated Mind by Hayes. I mean, there's a lot of great books. I talked about Pro-Social. That's using evolutionary science to build productive, equitable, and collaborative groups, which is by Atkins, Wilson, and Hayes. And yeah, those are some of just probably the foundational things that for me that I've found a ton of value in. And even if you wanted to just work on your own self, there's self-help books, which are Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, are really great books that I continue to go back to constantly because there's always challenges that show up in my life that I'm never going to be an expert on. But so I guess those are some of the places that I would start. And of course, if you can, going in to look at any of the boot camps that are out there, that is just a phenomenal experience to be in that and to work on not only yourself, but I've brought teams of people with me to boot camps, and we've done those boot camps together and then talked about how we incorporate those strategies into just our daily work life.
Probably lots more. And I agree with that. If you look at them with a behavior analytic lens, I do think there's a lot of really great nuggets of information
Yes.
out there.
Right.
Kind of think, okay, but how does this work within that behavior analytic framework?
Yes.
There's a
Mhm.
lot of really great information out there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add actually, you could actually go to ACT for behavior analysts if they still have them available in the training as well, that do a really great job of really digging a lot deeper that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for some of the other professions and fields that are looking in incorporating ACT. So I definitely would recommend that for behavior analysts if they're interested.
Jody, as always, I do appreciate the conversation, and I hope that it gives our listeners something to kind of think about and chew on. And to the T, like take an action on this.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do to move forward from here? I think is a really great takeaway. So whether that is looking at some of these resources, thinking about your own values and what you think about things, I think that would be great. So Jody, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise with us as always.
Thank you. This is always so much fun. I love it. I appreciate all the work that you are doing and everyone in the community. And it's just wonderful to be able to give an opportunity to hopefully pay it back and folks learn something a little new or different that they're open to trying out. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, again, we really appreciate you. And thank you to our listeners, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.